comes in many forms and has many negative effects that can last up to a lifetime. The National Institute on Drug Abuse presented a survey, a 2020 survey, with results showing that 40.3 million people suffered with substance abuse disorders in the US that year. Of those, only 6.5% actually received treatment. There's difficulty in helping addicts and giving them proper treatment. This is partly due to the disconnect that there is between experts on the nature of substance abuse. Experts disagree whether addiction is a behavior that is voluntary or not. On one side, we have Stephen Slate, who argues that addiction and drug use are not compulsive and are choices that an individual makes. He cites experiments through the 60s and 70s that were done by researchers where they would trick alcoholics into drinking alcohol without them knowing. They were told that the drink was not alcoholic and they showed no additional compulsion to drink. They also had the opposite where they had alcoholics drink a drink that they were told was alcoholic when in fact it wasn't, and they showed a much greater compulsion, and they drank a lot more than those who didn't actually drink alcohol. In the end, researchers concluded that the compulsion itself to drink alcohol was not like a physiological or a chemical reaction to the actual alcohol, to the actual ethanol, but instead it was due to the thought processes of the individuals. Slate himself interprets these results, and he ultimately says that heavy substance use is a choice that is based on thoughts, and that it's not an involuntary behavior, that it's not triggered by the power of something like a chemical over the brain. On the other hand, we have the view of Maya Zizalowicz. Zizalowicz argues that the way drug use and drugs affect the addict ends up distorting how the addict themselves think and how they make choices that involve the drug use itself. The addiction, as she says, affects the stream of consciousness, and it changes how the addict acts, actually. And this leads to what she calls delayed discounting, which is when behavior changes over time to prioritize short-term rewards over long-term rewards, where it might have been different before. She recalls her own experience where, with a desire for cocaine, how this overcame her relationships and it overcame other aspects of her life and ended up affecting her decision making, and changing how she made decisions. Ultimately, in the end, both Slate and Zizalowicz agree that addiction itself stems from a choice, but they differ in how they view the end result. Slate, on one hand, argues that it is individual choice, that it's a choice the user themselves make, and they choose addiction by choosing to come back. And Zizalowicz, on the other hand, argues the drug use affects choice making in of itself and what an individual desires, that the desires and the choices that they make and they want to make are altered by the very thing that they're consuming, that they're taking, and this ultimately affects them and leads to them wanting that, even if it wasn't something that they would have wanted originally. And the sense of these two is an example of why the divide on the nature of addiction is so important. It is important for experts to debate this because correctly addressing how addicted individuals, addressing the addiction in of itself, can help in giving drug users appropriate treatment, be it through medicine or through addiction inhibitors, through those, or on the other side, through behavioral or or psychological therapy or something like that. Otherwise, giving an individual a treatment that doesn't provide any real benefit in the end or change is only going to lead to a waste of time and a waste of valuable resources.